and welcome to WooStream, bringing Willamette to you. My name is Tiffany Newton, and I'm the Director of Graduate Alumni Engagement here at Willamette. Today's conversation features Amy Myers, Professor and Director of Bar Preparation for the College of Law. In this role, she has designed and overseen the BEAST, Bar Exam Accountability and Support Team's supplemental bar preparation program, as well as teaching a variety of courses on legal research and writing, as well as applied legal analysis. Director Myers will give us all some insights into how the process of preparing graduates for the bar exam has changed over the years, with a particular focus on this past year, where graduates navigated preparing for the most important exam of their lives during a global pandemic, raging wildfires, historic ice storms, and lengthy power outages. There's other things I'm sure that we didn't mention. We'll also examine some of the opportunities that came out of the class of 2020 being granted diploma privilege, and we'll discuss what the future might look like for the bar exam as we look at what it truly takes to ensure that our alumni are practice ready for the legal careers of their choosing. Director Myers, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
We're so excited to have you. Now, to start us off, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into academia, this role, and really kind of what brought you here and what that path has looked like.
So this could be its own whole WooStream, but this is kind of a story of the road not taken. I actually thought I was going to get into academia via a very different route. I was intending to become an academic, teaching through my interest in molecular microbiology. And I was pursuing the specific roots of pathogenesis of a bug called Pseudomonas and how it knew it was in a burn and not just living on, say, a hospital floor. So the next obvious career pathway is to go to law school. And the long and short of that is that I wound up instead, after practicing for a number of years, starting to teach legal research and writing in the fall of 2008. And then through a couple twists and turns, I actually came to Willamette in 2012 for a workshop with the legal research and writing department here. I was on a panel with our much loved and missed colleague, Assistant Dean Ed Harry, and very much enjoyed meeting the faculty and being here. So I was very excited when Willamette had an opening, and they were looking for someone who would be interested in working with LRW and with Bar Passage. And so I had a little bit of experience in helping students work with their legal writing and reframing it for bar essay writing and grading those essays for bar purposes. So Dean Bridgman decided that for some reason I would be a good person for this, and here I am. So there's a few other gaps along the way, but that's kind of the short version of the long story of why I got here. And so I'm very happy, and things have changed even since then, but here we go.
And we're so happy to have you. Now, if you could tell us a little bit about what an average day looks like for you. What's the best part of your job? And on the flip side, what is the most challenging?
Are we talking about the pandemic with having two teenagers in the house all the time? Or are we talking about, no. So I think it's easier to sort of sum it up by taking a step back and say that as a JD and as a practicing attorney, I always took the attorney and counselor at law part very seriously. I started out as a public defender. I worked defending doctors and hospitals sued for malpractice. And then I worked as a plaintiff's attorney, helping people who were in need of representation because of employment discrimination of various kinds. So a lot of that involves the counselor portion of the attorney and counselor at law. And I think that's a huge part of being a professor, is the counselor part. And so that is the big chunk of time in my average day. Obviously, I do a lot of teaching, but I also spend a lot of time either by email or by Zoom these days, or in my office in more normal time, just getting to know my students individually, seeing how I can help them in whatever they need. Maybe they need a different learning style. Maybe they need a supplement to help them understand the material. Maybe they need it to be presented in a different way. So it's helping them unlock their potential. And I think that counseling part is as much of a part of being a good professor as it is being a good attorney. And that's also true in my role in the director of bar preparation, because we have to help the students unlock their potential for bar passage too, help them to find the best way to pass the bar. I think you asked me about what the most challenging part of my job is, and that would definitely be the double-edged sword of receiving results. I love to celebrate successes with students, and I shed tears over the not successful things with students. It's a very emotionally invested position that I get in with these students. And so, especially students who I worked with over all 3 years and then beyond graduation, it is really difficult to see someone work so hard and then not be successful. And there's always the knowledge that we can try again and try a different way, but it doesn't ease the immediate grief of not being successful on the bar exam or not getting the job or whatever hasn't been successful. So that's really hard.
Yeah. And it's a bit of a privileged position as well, because you've seen the journey from all sides for so long. So you really have been present through all of their achievements, and if they need to try again. So that
absolutely. And I love it because I've seen some of these students from even before admissions. Like I've done the admissions events with them, and then the orientation events, the intro to law, and worked with them all the way through up to bar day. Mm-hmm. And, some of them we stay in touch after, just during that waiting period when they're so tense, and we just kind of check in a little bit, or even in the job search. So there's really that emotional connection, and I love that part of the job. So it's truly rewarding. But yeah, the flip side of that is the sadness and the grief that I share with my students.
Yeah. And I know we're going to get into, that there was a little bit more of that maybe in some ways this year as people were dealing with so much uncertainty. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to start with some general slides and information to kind of situate this conversation, provide context on exactly what the exam is, its history, how it's changed over the years, how we prepare folks for the bar, and then we can kind of get into looking a bit more at this past year and focusing on that.
Absolutely. And so maybe I am the only one who is super fascinated by this history, but since I have control of the screen share at the moment, hopefully you are seeing my fancy little slide presentation right now. So if I can make my little mouse work. I think it's something that's interesting, just that people take for granted that the bar exam is something that has been around forever. And it's actually not true. So, and no, I'm not going to bore you by giving you the entire history of the bar exam in the colonial era and the history of the diploma privilege. But It is interesting to me, at least, that the bar exam, when the NCBE initially conceived of it, was not intended to be testing information by memory. But they first started talking about the multiple choice examination as a way to reduce the increase in grading burdens on the state, because it was going to be this machine graded objective test. So, just so you know, all of you who've enjoyed the multiple choice test, it's just to make it easier for people to grade. It has nothing to do with anything. All right, so moving on into more modern times, the first multiple choice exam was actually not given until 1972. So that's something that some of us have seen in our lifetimes. And originally, it only tested a couple of subjects. Common law wasn't added until 1975. The first ethics exam wasn't given until 1980. The first essay exam was given in 1988, testing different subjects than that which the current exam tests, and in a different format. It was changed to what I would call more of the modern topics with the standard 30-minute essay format in 1993. So, the exam as we currently know it is still evolving. The MPT, which is the performance test where students are given a closed universe library. They're given some law that they then have to write maybe a memo or a letter or complete some other task in a timed format. Didn't come into the exam until 1997. And then this experimental testing, which is not fun for students. It's where the NCBE starts using questions that haven't been fully vetted yet. So the MPRE, for example, is 60 questions, but only 50 of those are graded. 10 of them are still being tested to see whether they're worth using on the MPRE. And so it's just kind of a little bit of a mind game for some students. So that started in 2005, began on the MBE in 2007 with 10 out of 200 questions. 2007, the essay subject matter coverage changed to allow the multiple choice topics to be added as essays, changed a few topics around. Thankfully, for those of us, me, who hated the MBE question format that included the none of the above, all of the above answers, the 1 and 3, but not 2 style answers. They got rid of that in July of 2009. Those of you who took the bar exam after that, be very, very grateful for that change. That's all I can say. The uniform bar exam, which is something that we'll be talking a little bit more about, was first given in 2011. So it's only been 10 years that the exam that we're going to start talking a little bit more about as the bar exam, that is currently the thing that a lot of these students are taking, has been in play. In 2015, civil procedure was added to the MBE, and a couple of other topics were removed from the essays. Again, I was not heartbroken for this change because I did not like those topics. In February of 2017, they changed a little bit of the coverage and increased the pretesting questions so that 25 out of the 200 questions are now experimental, which is not an insignificant change if you think about it. Now it means that 7% of the questions you're answering for your bar exam aren't graded, which is kind of stressful for students. And then in March of 2020, the ethics exam became computer-based only instead of the Scantron version. And you have to go to a computer testing center. I don't think that's a great change, but nobody asked my opinion. So there we have it. That's the way it is now. So whole ton of changes from the way things were even when I took the bar. I think others on the call would probably have even different views of what their experiences were like, but a lot of changes. So if we're going to talk about the time in February 17, this is where we really kind of set the scope of the coverage. That's the last major change. And so that's kind of the modern exam, and we have this UBE thing coming. So there are a couple things that happened in the fall of 2016. First of all, as a little humble brag here and a Hamilton reference, that's when I started over here at Willamette. We started our BEAST program. And Willamette as a university also had a bar passage task force, which is where we started to look at our curriculum, since we knew that the Oregon Supreme Court was going to be adopting the UBE. So we were going to need to do some changes in the curriculum. We wanted to change some coverage. And we also wanted to try to set up maybe some tiers to help students who had lower grade point averages have a little bit more academic support. In addition, then Dean Bridgman gave me some freedom to revamp the 3L bar prep course for students who were more at risk or who wanted some extra support for bar passage. And we did a little bit of that on the fly as we started, because there were some changes coming fast and furious in terms of what was going on with the bar exam and what we were learning about what hadn't gone as well for Willamette grads in 2016. So there were some designs as we go. And we also started backing up the bar curriculum into the second year and into the first year in courses that I teach called Applied Legal Analysis. So we really want to support our students all the way through using bar style essay questions, even in those first year and second year classes, to make sure that our students are bar ready all the way through. So here we go. In 2017, Oregon started giving its first UBE and changed the cut score and totally changed the topics. So if you think about it, students who had been preparing to graduate in 2017 had been taking classes for a certain bar exam that they thought was coming. And I'll show you another slide in a minute about the difference in the topics. But those topics were not on the bar exams in February and July of 2017. And there were topics that were on the bar exam that students had not taken classes for. So despite that, they did a wonderful job of adjusting and going with it. And our faculty gave workshops to support them and help them through it. And it was a wonderful community collaborative effort as part of the BEAST programming to really support them and help them get through this change. So then things, we were sort of humming along, swimming through until March of 2020. And then this swimming hit the wall. for lack of a better metaphor. And we had the whole COVID thing happen. And so we'll come back, I think, if I'm right, Tiffany, and talk a little bit more about that later. But just in terms of the timeline for our graduates, and I know we have a couple on the call, and so just all applause to you all, because dang, you all went through a lot. So I just kind of wrote on the slide, there are a lot of issues here that you all went through. Not only did you not get a graduation ceremony, but the bar stuff, it was just a whole lot of not fun. So, and that is, I'm sure, grammatically correct for a legal writing professor to say. So in June, the Oregon Supreme Court allowed diploma privilege for certain 2020 grads. The order did not cover all of our Willamette grads. So we still had people who were taking the bar in different states, in Oregon, people who needed to take an exam for portability in other UBE jurisdictions. Lots of things still going on. In July, we had people taking the bar in several states that were giving in-person exams, such as Oregon. So that was bar exam number 1. Bar exam number 2 was in August of 2020. There were some technology issues, and students also had some issues with their leases, and we'll talk more about that, but the bar exam was supposed to have been over by now. Bar exam number 3 was an online exam in early September. Bar exam number 4 was in late September, also online. Bar exam number 5 was in October of 2020. Also all online, and also issues with the exam software and the artificial intelligence aspects, and just lots and lots of fun. And so then we moved to the February 2021 exam, which was remote. It was kind of split in terms of how many jurisdictions considered keeping the cut scores down. Many of them had moved them down because of everything going on in 2020. Washington did remain reduced to 266. Oregon went back up to 274. And we also had the ice storms. So we don't have those results back yet. We are waiting, and fingers crossed, because this group worked very hard, and so we are hopeful. And now we are getting the next group ready for the July of 2021. And as I was telling Tiffany earlier, I had to change the slide as we were working on this today, because in the course of the day, we had more announcements. So we have 21 states that are going to be remote as of, I don't know, whatever time that was, 3:00 this afternoon. Oregon is planning to have an in-person bar exam in July, but this is creating some complications for our students who are currently trying to apply for the bar exam, because do you want to take a bar exam online only, where you have no access to scratch paper, where you're trying to work in just little windows and scrolling through things? I'm kind of an old school pencil and paper, mark everything up person. Do you trust that it's really, really, really going to stay in person? Because they say it's in person now, but things are changing by the day. It's not fun in terms of advising students. So that's where we are today. Ask me on Monday where we're going to be, and who knows. So that's kind of the timeline. So I'm going to give you kind of a quick rundown, I said I would show you the change that the 2017 grads had to deal with. So what they had been preparing for all through law school was to take a bar exam, first of all, that was weighted with the essays and the MPT being equal at 25% each. And then that got shifted so that the essays were 30%, the MPT was 20%. Oops. And then they had been preparing to take the regular MBE topics plus administrative law and Oregon distinctions. So Oregon civil procedure, Oregon evidence, federal tax, Oregon ethics. And you can see that the list changed significantly. So instead of Oregon evidence, now it's only the federal rules of evidence. Federal tax students have taken as a class, that's gone. Family law, however, is now a tested topic. So this was a not insignificant change to pull on our students kind of at the last minute. And so, yeah, we had the faculty pulling together to do workshops and things to really help these students prepare as part of BEAST to get them through. But, there was something I was going to say and I just totally lost it. So hopefully I will find it again. Okay, gone. So, the conflicts of laws came up that they were not prepared for either. That was the other thing that got added in. Yay, found it. So just kind of the change. And so then the other thing that I was going to mention is that in theory, Oregon had said the first UBE was. In practice, the February 2017 exam that they gave was actually a UBE. Mm. So it tested all of these things that were or were not supposed to be tested, depending on how you want to look at it, without really telling the students. It wasn't an Oregon bar exam. So it was just kind of a mess. And yet these students got through it and they're amazing. So also claps to them if they're here. All right. Promise you we'll kind of zip through this a lot faster now. So, just for people who are wondering, so we talked about the UBE being kind of this new modern exam that we have finally gotten to, even though it's only been in the last 10 years. I forget, I think it's 41 states that we're up to now that have adopted the UBE, with a couple states just giving it for the first time in 2021. So it's becoming semi-universal. There are a couple states, like I would be surprised if California ever wanted to adopt it, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. Don't tell my kids. The other thing that's interesting about the UBE is that the states can set their own passing score. So the bar is scored out of 400 points. Complicated, let it go. Otherwise, we're going to be here until 9 o'clock tonight. You'll note that Oregon is one of the highest scores, even though we actually reduced the score in 2017. It had previously been 284, which was the highest score at that point. But most of the Western states are pretty high in terms of cut scores. So our students are facing some pretty big challenges in terms of passing the bar. So we need them not only to perform at the average score, because the multiple choice is scored on a national average, we need them to be above average, because the average isn't going to be sufficient. The thing that's interesting about the UBE is, let's say a student takes the bar in Alaska and doesn't get quite to a 280. So the student gets, say, a 276. And so unfortunately, that's a fail in Alaska. But the student can take that 276 to any jurisdiction that accepts a score of 276 or below. So that student can now be a licensed attorney in any of these other states. And then after a period of practice, the student can apply for reciprocal admission to states that will accept it. So the UBE allows for this portability of scores. It makes reporting things to the ABA a little complicated because the student technically did not pass the bar, but is a licensed attorney, which is really kind of the end goal that we're looking for here. So it's good and not good at the same time. So the student has the good outcome, which is what matters. All right. So we saw this a little bit briefly, but earlier briefly, that multiple choice questions consist of the same subjects that they've been doing for several years. The essays are worth 5% each. You get 6 that cover the multiple choice questions, plus the standard topics that, again, have been done for the last couple years. I'll let people look at this a little bit more if they are interested in it. The multiple choice questions, there are 200 of them. There are 25 for each topic, and then the 25 unscored questions. So the multiple choice counts for 50% of the exam. The essays are 30% of the exam, and then those closed book tasks are 10% each for 20% of the exam. And then, when it says state components, that just means that the states actually grade it. So it's not state-based law, it's still national law. I had that on the next slide. Anyway, so what does the bar exam look like in terms of the 2 days when it is given? Day 1 is your written day, so you have 3 hours to write your 6 essays, lunchtime, and then 3 hours to write your MPTs. Day 2, 3 hours for 100 multiple choice, lunch, 3 hours for 100 multiple choice. For the people who are doing the online exam, it's broken up into 90-minute interval sessions. So it would be 3 essays, then a break, then 3 essays, then lunch, and so on, or 50 MBEs break, 50 MBEs lunch, and so on. So again, that's a difference that people who are trying to figure out, do I want to take online or do I want to take in person, are trying to consider now as they're trying to figure out where they want to apply for the bar. It's also a difference when we're trying to help them study. How do you build your stamina? Because it's a very different type of studying if you're studying for 3 hours and 6 essays versus 90 minutes and 3 essays, or the multiple choice and the timing. I guess this is kind of the point where the BEAST program comes in with all of this context that we've just talked about. So in 2014, the NCBE came out with this report from the ABA task force, where they noted that a JD program by itself is no longer sufficient to prepare graduates for the bar examination, and that instead it's actually a separate and distinct competency. students need to develop their own skills and test-taking strategies to answer the three tested formats: the multiple choice questions, the essays, and the performance test. And so it's strongly suggested that bar preparation is one more thing that needs to be added to a law student's education. And there was a little resistance, I think, in academia to this concept for a while. There are the commercial programs that many bar studiers have paid for over the years that are supposed to teach you how to take the bar exam. Why should law schools be doing that? We're not teaching to the test. We're teaching you to think. We're teaching you to solve problems. We're teaching you how to be lawyers. Why should we teach you how to take the bar exam? So it's been kind of a developing thing. And actually, it's interesting. So we have our class that has actually become so popular that we've had to offer 2 sections of it, and there's a waiting list because so many students want to take this bar preparation class because we've had such good results with it, which is surprising to me, at least, and very exciting that people are so excited about this class that we've developed about how to take the bar exam. I'm quite proud of that, actually. But we also have this supplemental program that we offer. So it starts essentially after final exams and then runs through the time of the bar exam and somewhat after, just kind of on an informal basis, to help students through all of the steps of the process. So we called it BEAST. Frankly, I think that was sort of a late night session trying to come up with a good acronym because we wanted to think of the different components that a bar studier really needs. And so some students really need accountability, someone just to check in with them and make sure they're doing the work, or they're working on what they need to be working on and not something that they don't need to be working on. But they also need support. And whether that comes in the form of knowledge, whether that's emotional support, whether it's in terms of resources, there are lots of types of support. And we wanted it to be thought of as a team. And whether that's teams of students working together or a team in terms of the faculty and the administration working with these graduates, we've even had alumni offer to help mentor or work with current bar studiers, kind of a pay it forward sort of thing. So it's really wonderful to see what has evolved from this program. So just some of the aspects that we have in the BEAST program. We do have a partnership with Barbary that helps us with this progression for students throughout law school and then through their bar studies. And we can get some data from that to help the students help themselves recognize their strengths and their weaknesses as they're going through their bar prep. And what we try to encourage the students to do is really focus on their areas that are weaker to try to turn those into strengths, but also make sure they're focusing on the areas that are most highly tested so that they're triaging and spending their time where it's most effectively spent, instead of something that's only going to be a question or two on the bar exam. I think the most important thing that we do with the program is we have these faculty volunteers who serve as mentors. And that emotional connection and support is so huge and so key. And that takes the form of whatever the student and the faculty mentor really want to do. We have tons of resources we provide. Everything, like I said, from workshops to problems to nagging people to eat right and sleep and affirmations. And we try to take a holistic view of the student as an individual and make sure they're getting all of their needs met. We have offered some limited financial support, some counseling through our partnership with Access Lex. We have some other grant sources. We have a blog with a discussion forum so the students can connect with one another and just say, is anyone else having a nervous breakdown this week? Because it kind of helps. It's very lonely and emotionally stressful, particularly in Barpocalypse times, to study. And so it's nice to have that connection of other people and not be out on Facebook or Reddit or in other crazy town of bar people things. So again, just kind of some individual attention and trying to help the students be the best that they can be. So the exciting firework recent results in this modern era of the bar. What have we done with this BEAST program? Well, as the ABA calculates things, which is probably the best way to look at it, our class of 2017, despite all those things we talked about, ultimately had an 87.88% pass rate within 2 years of graduation. The class of 2018 improved upon that. The class of 2019 had an 81% first-time passage rate, but within 1 year of graduation, they have increased that to 91%. And the class of 2020, which, again, all hail for what they have been through, had a 91% first-time exam pass rate. But when you look at the graduates passing exams or receiving diploma privilege, that is up to 98.04%. So, huzzah! And then this brings us to the Barpocalypse. I don't know how much you want to talk about this. I know we're running a little bit short on time here.
A little bit, but I think it would be helpful to really, you've done a great job of kind of giving a history of the bar, some of the nuts and bolts about general prep for this program, for the exam. But I really think if we could dive in just for a minute or two into what the experience was like for you as you're pulling out your hair and trying to figure out how to manage the unknown. And then for students, and then for students who are trying to, prepare for the biggest exam of their lives, they're in the midst of a international, public health crisis, and they're trying to navigate all these different factors while also kind of setting themselves up for their legal careers and this next big step that they've invested a lot of time and energy into.
So I am going to take the student side of it first because so much of my job is student-centered. These students just amaze me. So, going back and looking at the timeline, not only do these students have so many delays, they have the emotional fatigue, they have the study fatigue, because, you're taking the bar in July. Oh, wait, no, you're taking the bar in October. Sorry. Hey, keep going though. Keep on that study path. Can you keep going 8 hours a day? And then they're expecting, to graduate in May, take the bar in July, and have a job. And whoops, not so much. Now we have some financial stress we have to deal with, or maybe a spouse lost a job. Maybe we have a child who is being homeschooled or unable to go to daycare or to somebody else's house for care. There's nowhere to go study. We can't open the library as we usually do. Maybe you have some issue of inequality of access to materials. You can't get on the internet to live stream the lectures, and the law school can't broadcast them for you as we usually do. So we have those problems, and so we're trying to solve them. This is kind of where I come in, tearing out my hair, like, how can we fix these individual issues? There's also, let's not forget this whole COVID thing. What happens if you get sick? Someone else in your family gets sick. You can't really travel, but that's a huge emotional stress. Or if you are sick for a long time. That takes a small chunk out of your studying. Or if you're nursing someone, that's a problem. Like we said before, there are problems with leases. We thought you were moving out in August. Just kidding. I need to stay here till October. Do you mind? And it's not like the real estate market is great. Wildfires, anybody?
Yeah.
We have people displaced or trying to find hotels when they're already financially strapped. Ice storms. Who needs power to study for an online bar exam or internet? All these sorts of things. And that goes to food. We don't have food because we have no power and we can't get out because the roads are closed. Going back to the summer, that's when there were all the social justice concerns, and we have the Black Lives Matter protests going on. And so we have many students in our community who are either members of the BIPOC community who want to be out protesting, or who want to be out, students who want to support their friends out protesting. Or it's just an emotional thing to be witnessing anyway. I had a student who was struggling because there was tear gas coming into the student's apartment in Portland. How do you solve that problem? That one is actually kind of beyond my skill set. But it is a very real problem. We have the election stress. There are a lot of emotional stressors. And so for me, I try to be the one to listen. I try to give out affirmations in the emails that I send to these students. Sometimes I just don't know what to say. I can just be their person that can listen and not judge. Maybe I can have a solution. Maybe I don't have a solution. But they know they can call me or text me at any hour, and they know I turn off my phone when I'm not around. So I will at least get back to them at a civilized hour if I'm not there. But and sometimes it may just be me reaching out to Dean Galini saying, okay, need your help. What can we do with this?
Yeah.
And he may be referring it on to somebody else who can help.
Well, and
but
I think
we have a great network and a great community here.
Well, and I think that's so much the benefit of a smaller college where there's a lot of individualized support. There are ongoing relationships so that people feel comfortable disclosing if they're encountering barriers to their success or challenges that they need some additional supports to address. And like you said, they feel comfortable kind of sharing their wins with you, but also checking in with you when they might need additional supports or direction. And that's great to hear. I know we only have a few minutes left, so I kind of want to shift it a little bit to kind of what you think is coming up for the bar exam, what you might be seeing on the horizon, and then what we at the school can do to make sure that students are adequately prepared to practice law, whether that's still training towards, taking the bar exam versus moving into, alternative professional development opportunities like the Racial Justice Task Force or, extended externships or other things that we've developed at the school.
Sure. So I think there are a couple different things in the works. I think in Oregon I know in Oregon specifically, there is a task force in place, and Dean Galini is probably far more qualified than I am to speak to this, but it's looking at alternatives to the bar exam, such as possibly diploma privilege or some form of apprenticeship, or other alternative means to bar exam licensure. That doesn't mean the bar exam is going away nationally, just an option perhaps in Oregon. And I think it was in 2018, the Oregon Board of Bar Examiners looked at doing something similar to what Washington State had done with a law clerk rule, where someone wouldn't even have to go to law school, but you could do this 4-year tutor and mentor program, tutor and clerk, I believe it was called. And then if you did enough things, you could sit for the exam and be licensed. There are a couple of very interesting programs, one out in New Hampshire, and then Wisconsin also has a diploma privilege that I think would be great models for Oregon to look at to study. And I'm sure they already are. I know that task force is going like gangbusters already, so I'm excited to hear about that. The NCBE is actually doing its own thing, which is long and complicated, but essentially they're looking at changing both the content and the structure and testing format of the bar exam sometime in the next 4 to 5 years. So it's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of that. So I am just kind of keeping an eye on that, and we'll see what comes out of it, and then redesign the program one more time to keep meeting the needs of our students as things keep evolving.
Well, and there's just so many pivots that have been involved just in your journey in the past 5 years. So there's something new around every corner, I feel like. And I do want to take a moment to just kind of dream a little bit and ask, in a perfect world, what you might at the school want to adopt for bar preparation. I know Dean Galini has mentioned maybe a 1L class teaching students learning how to learn, what the process could be for sharpening those kinds of skills. So just for a minute, aside from all the other heavy topics we've mentioned, is there anything that you're kind of eager to maybe implement or to develop a little bit further?
Oh my gosh, yes. Is Dean Galini still here? Yeah. Yes, I would love to. That's one of the things that I hear a lot from some of my students in my applied legal analysis, which is more of the academic support classes. Oh, I wish I had had this class sooner. Oh, I wish I could continue to take this class. Oh, I wish I had had more of this. Mm-hmm. And it's always interesting to me because a lot of the students don't think they need the class. It's fun to watch the attitude shift. They don't think they need the class at the beginning of the semester. And then by the end of the class, they're like, can I stay in your class even if I get the grades to get out of your class? And so it's funny because I'll have students trying to do petitions to get into the class, even though they've gotten the grades that would get them out of it. So I would love to do something for all of the 1Ls, even the ones who don't think they need it, to really help support them and get this analytical thinking and reasoning and all of these skills that they need, not just for the bar exam, not just for law school, but for the practice of law, reinforced in a different way than in a traditional doctrinal classroom, and just have that as something that runs through their entire law school curriculum. I don't know how I'm going to do that for all 6 semesters, as well as continue to teach the bar prep class and do the bar prep, the beast and the mentoring and all that. But I'll figure it out.
Well, and it's one of those moments where, kind of your passion for counseling and supporting folks and really giving them skills to put in their toolbox so that they can take that with them, not just in preparing for an exam, which is 2 days, 2 very difficult days, but again, just 2 days of their lives, versus having those skills available for a lifetime of practice and meaning and contribution in the field of their choice. Really, I am going to kind of wrap up with my favorite question, which is, did we miss anything? Is there anything from the conversations you and I have had from preparing for this event, from your work with different students and different members of the BEAST team on campus? Is there anything else that you kind of want to share with those who have joined us this evening or who might be watching this video in the future, or, an ask of our alumni community of how they can support you in this work and just really contribute to the success of our graduates?
I guess the one thing that I have not said that I wish I had said is just, I want to say thank you, because this is not something that I have achieved just because I'm working here on my own. Dean Bridgman and Dean Galini have had such wonderful faith in me and allowed me to do something that seems very non-traditional, to come to them and say, okay, I think we need to be very touchy-feely and mentor law students and really meet their emotional needs. I mean, law is not known for being an emotional, touchy-feely sort of thing. Despite the well-known challenges of mental health and addiction in the legal profession. But when you start thinking about what lawyers and law students who need the support in academic success and in bar prep, a lot of that really is just that emotional connection. And so then for them to believe in me, to say, I want to do this and I want to get the faculty to volunteer, and they have in droves, and to be willing to give up time every week in the summer, over Christmas break or winter break, to mentor students one-on-one and, multiple students. This is so huge to just have that nurturing of the students. And I think that contributes so much to our success. And I also think it's amazing that we have some alumni donors who have helped fund some of these programs to allow us to do what we are doing. And I want to thank them for that, particularly to help with that has helped alleviate some of the financial stress on some of these students, especially during this bar apocalypse challenge, and to help us with the resources that we need to continue to improve the bar passage and the success of this law school overall. So I may be the one sitting here and talking about, yay, we have these awesome results, but it is truly, that's why BEAST has the T. It is a team effort. And so I want to say thank you. The team includes all of these alumni and students and faculty and administrator who are part of it. So that's what I wanted to say.
And that's lovely. And I think it really speaks to Dean Collini's fond of saying culture is king. And I think we really have it takes a village approach when it comes to preparing folks for the bar and just in general, preparing everyone for professional development and then closing the loop where our alumni come back and support students who went through maybe slightly different experiences, but still through the journey that is law school. So I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening, Director Myers, for sharing your experiences and your knowledge and all the work that you do to prepare students, like I said, for one of the biggest exams of their lives. My thanks also go out to our other colleagues, members of the BEAST team, faculty, staff, student leaders, everyone who kind of pitches in and supports this program. And for those of you who have joined us online, I'll just say we appreciate so much you sharing your time with us. We thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope that you will continue to turn into WooStream, your virtual programming platform here at Willamette. And with that, I will thank everyone for their time. Hope you all have a good evening, that you stay safe and healthy, and that we will see you online soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Of course. Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye.